believe you're basically live now.
Fantastic.
I guess. Had like a rough day, so you'll have to cut me a
Oh man.
break.
All
Not a
right. Well,
not a rough day. I had a busy day.
okay.
Just a
Okay.
lot of work.
I'm actually, so I'm sorry to hear that, but there's also a small part of me that's a little bit happy to hear that because if you've had a rough day, that means you're going to be more critical about what I'm going to walk you through
Well,
in
yeah,
just
like
about a minute or
yeah,
so.
like
And
I
I
said
want that.
before, but like Brighton Beach, Coney Island is the only place to me that seems reasonable for New
Yeah.
York. So you're not going to get any argument from me there.
All right. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, then, I mean, the first 80% of this doesn't really matter because I actually did this theory backwards and I started at a location that I thought was the most likely based on, well, I mean, we'll get into it in a second, but I worked on it backwards. And so the beginning part of it to me is probably the weakest part. And then towards the end is a bit stronger. But I mean, we'll see.
Let's try this. This will be fun because we've never done this before. Um, I used to really like Coney Island. Let me pull up the New York thing. And let me tell you what I saw in the
Mhm.
image. There's not a lot in the verse.
Do you want
You
me to
know,
stop sharing?
you're not sharing anything.
Oh shit! I thought I was still sharing. My screen did this one thing where it like flipped out, and so all right, let me go back to. Well, do you want me to stop sharing at least, and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hopefully you.
Let me
Yeah.
let me tell you this, and then you can break mine apart, and then we'll like talk. And I'm kind of curious because I've never went into a conversation about Coney Island with
Yeah.
someone, with them having been able to sort of tell me if I'm an idiot with my ideas,
Oh
right?
gosh.
Because well, so it tends to be that people who when I talk to people about the secret, they're like, George, tell me if just kind of like this, like break this apart. But I never
Yeah.
get the chance to do that, and I don't have that many ideas for Coney Island, and there's just a couple, like Surf Ave. Like the biggest thing in the image is the wave, and
Yes.
the
That's
main
that's
road
part
is
of this theory.
Surf Ave,
You're
right?
gonna see. Oh, there's a whole. I got a whole slide on it. So
It's
you've also talked to people. You've talked to Ben Asen. You've talked to friends of Byron's. And if you're going to know a guy, right, you can talk to his wife, you can talk to his kids, whatever that may be. But if you're going to know a guy, you talk to his friends, the people who grew up with him,
yeah,
and they both say, if it's not in Brooklyn, I'm going to be surprised. Also, Byron loved Coney Island.
yeah. Ben said Coney Island was
Loved
his
it.
happy
They used to
place.
take their girls, their kids there. And if the girls were like, because I know they said in the past, like, oh, well, Dad said, where would Daddy hide it, right? Like, I'm sure they've got a lot of great memories going to Coney Island and having a fun time there too.
Yeah, I have never heard a verse match that I like more. For you'll often hear a whirring sound than at
Okay,
Coney
yeah.
Island, the
See, mine's a bit
Cyclone.
different. Mine's a bit different, but you'll
I,
see. I mean, I like that too. It works for that too.
the Cyclone, it works so well. And wasn't there like a
Plus,
tornado or something back in the 80s there too? There was another there was another roller coaster. I can't remember.
yeah, 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 yeah,
It
yeah.
was the
Well,
Cyclone and
it's still
something
there
else.
though.
The
Still there
Cyclone's
though.
still there, but there was another one. It was like the tornado. I don't remember. And then there's like the what is it? The Screaming Eagle
I'm
ride.
not familiar with that one.
That one's not at Luna Park. It's at the next park over.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but yeah. Anyway, like those are the big things to me that are like, oh yeah, Coney's great.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that Ben's like it's his happy place. It's where Byron went to relax.
Yes.
Because I
See,
always thought
I
like
see it
the
as the Indies native, right? So that's how you'll see it in mine later on. So the Indies native being the cyclone, and the
oh well,
cyclone is a type of tropical storm that originates over in the Indies.
okay.
Yeah, so I'm just giving you a sneak peek right here. That's
Oh, I mean, we can go into yours because mine's that's mainly mine. Like
wait, wait,
I really
were you gonna show something or?
no. I was just talking about it. Like
Oh, okay.
I don't need to show you any
I thought you were pulling
my
something up
no
here.
no 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 my ideas. I just be like blah, and if they make sense, they make sense, and if they don't,
Sure,
they
sure,
don't. You know
sure.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, I get you. I get you. All right. We're not gonna go. I put this together so I could give a half-hour presentation to my younger sister and try and and try and win her over and be like, "Am I crazy?" And she's like, "Yeah, you are crazy, but But you know, there it is. Okay, so we'll start generically speaking. This is stuff that's pretty obvious to most everyone. You get your numbers, you get your coordinates, a somewhat of a resemblance to the Statue of Liberty in her face. You get this eagle head, which is just everywhere from Ellis Island to the Chrysler Building to every eagle statue that's probably in New York City at this point, as well as potentially an upside down apple at the bottom of the wave for the Big Apple. So that one's a little bit weaker.
No, I mean I can
All
see
right.
it. It's fine. I've heard, especially with New York, I've heard so much worse.
Now, I see the gray giant, and I mean, I'm from New York, right? And so, you know, if I were to think of a single giant building in New York City, I'm going to think the Empire State Building. Now, there are parts to my theory that I feel quite strongly about. There are parts that I'm like, that's me stretching. And then there are parts of my theory that I will straight up call out and be like, this is very weak. I just wanted to say it because I need to say it because it was in the back of my head, and there it is. That piece of it is the E in gray, it being probably just some literary agent that Byron put in there to make it look fancy, and that's just some literary way he was spelling gray. I like to think that the E in gray stands for Empire State Building. That's just me. But every single day, the Empire State Building, pretty much every single day actually, casts a shadow on Herald Square. And inside Herald Square, I might be able to actually zoom into it a little bit more because you can't really see it here, but oh, it's actually on the next screen, so we're fine. Um, Inside Herald Square, you've got James Gordon Bennett Memorial. Now, this is significant for two reasons. One, you got the statue of Minerva right in the middle, and she is surrounded by this very tall looking arch. She also resembles a little bit of I'm thinking she's a Rusalka, the woman in the painting who's floating above the water. She's got a clock above her, and the entire monument itself is very reminiscent of the clock and the texture behind the clock in the window pane. Also, fun fact, basically from August to November, this shadow is over the park at basically exactly 11 o'clock in the morning. So I only say that because I was there and it was really cool to be able to see it that way. So you can see, I wish I had gotten a closer photo when I was there to kind of show you the texture of the rock, but it's very similar to the texture of the rock behind the clock over here. And I'm showing this clock up here because the whole Herald Square is named after the Herald Tribune, the New York Herald Tribune, which is a newspaper from the 20s to the 60s. And their logo has basically the same number system going around it that we see around the clock over here. And it's really hard to find a clock that has numbers that are all going the same orientation, right? And any clock you see, they all want to just follow the circle around.
But there are some.
There are some. Oh, definitely. I mean, this is a theory. This is definitely not the theory. And I'll tell you it's not the theory because I followed each one of these steps to the location that I thought it was, and I dug there and it wasn't there. So that's why I need you to tear it apart because something didn't work out. So you can kind of see a small resemblance, right? You've got the arch here. You've got the arch for the whole painting. She's got her arms kind of extended out a little bit like this, you know, at basically 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And you can't really see it very well in this one, but Minerva over here has arms that are similarly extended. She's got a spear in this hand. We've got a flower in this hand. That's a little bit weaker, I guess. But this arm over here is extending over Broadway. And I've heard folks use the comparison that the slender path could be a play on words for Broadway.
Yeah, I
So
never
that's what I'm
understood
running
that.
with at
But
this point. I don't either. There's a lot that I don't understand about this entire treasure hunt, to be quite honest with you. But if I'm gonna go with something and try and figure it out, the reason that this is all part of this, to be honest with you, George, is because I worked it out backwards, and you'll see in a second why I landed here, and then kind of got excited about the arch, the woman, the arm over it, the shadow of the Empire State Building falling onto it. There were a lot of things that were coincidental that I was like, well, it'd be kind of weird if it didn't work out to be this way. So when you're here in Herald Square, this is the part that we're talking about, you'll often hear a whirring sound. You'll notice that on the right-hand side over here, you have grates in the ground. And these are all over New York City. And what they are is they're ventilation fans for the subways below. And in the summer, they need a way to cool down the subway tunnels so they don't overheat. And this is very famous because you see the photo of Marilyn Monroe standing over the ventilation fans, and they're blowing all the air up. So they got to get all the hot air out of there because in the summer it gets really hot. And so what you'll hear oftentimes in the summer when you're standing over these things is the ventilation fans going on and blowing all that hot air out of the subway tunnels. And to me, that's how I interpret the whirring sound as you're standing at the statue, hearing the ventilation fans going off. For cars abound, it's New York City. So I was like, well, that seems kind of obvious if it's cars, because it's like there are cars everywhere in New York City. And I saw that as a subway car. And they're going to have subway cars inside underneath the ventilation fans at the subway station nearby. And there's a subway station right next door to Herald Square. It's 34th Street, Herald Square Station. And there are a whole bunch of trains that run out of there, a whole bunch of train lines, right? So at this point, you're like, okay, cool. So I guess the subway might have some kind of play in this whole entire solution. So this is the piece that I think is pretty strong, only because I think there's a connection to Boston as well. But next part, take twice as many east step as the hour. So when he says east steps, to me, I thought that was really strange because if you're going to take an actual step somewhere, there's two problems with this. You don't take east steps, right? You take steps east, right? I'm going to take 22 steps east and go over there. I'm going to take 22 steps north and walk over that way. Maybe it's literary, maybe it's poetic. The problem I have is the or more piece. And if I'm going to take some steps, why would I be taking 22 steps or more at that point? If I'm really big, I could be taking fewer steps. If it's 22 staircases or 22 stair steps, and then like a few other ones, then tell me that at this point. So I think I have a pretty cool way of solving this, which is that for one, you get the D and then the line. So the window within the painting and then the line underneath it, making it look like a D line. So the D line subway. But the D line actually isn't the same D line that it was back in 1980, right? So what happened in 1980, it's small. So I mean, you'd have to be able to zoom in on this. But what I did was I kind of recreated my own map over here using the lines that you need. But the D line, which runs from 34th Street all the way through down here to Coney Island, is on the eastern side. What happened in 2001 is that it actually switched with the B line. So now the D line goes over here on the western side. And then the B line's over here. There's also a Q line that extends all the way down. But if you didn't look at that, then you would be using this 22 steps marker completely wrong and you'd end up in the wrong place. Now the or more piece means that if you start here at 34th Street and you take whatever train you want to take to your final destination, not the horror movie, but just the final place you're going to, which is West 8th Street Aquarium Station, then the minimum number of subway stops it's going to take you is 22 stops. But you can also take two other trains that are going to take 27 stops to get to this final place. So that's your 22 steps or more if you're taking a different line. But he wants you to take the D line because the D line takes you through Prospect Park, takes you right past the place where he grew up as a kid, right in Flatbush. Probably some other places as well, but that's probably the train that he would have taken when he was younger, trying to get out to Coney Island if he wanted to go to Coney Island. All right, let's keep going.
What line is that now?
That is technically two different lines. So it's the B line, but the B line doesn't go all the way down to West 8th Aquarium Station. That one is the Q line. The Q line is the one that goes all the way from 34th down to West 8th Aquarium. You've also got the fact that not the fact. You got the resemblance of the Rusalka and her dress to the subway line in Brooklyn. And you also got it. I've seen some folks where they flip the top half of her around and the flower matches this piece right here. But there's definitely a resemblance of the dress to this line over here, especially this little bloop right here and the little bloop in her dress. On top of that, and I know we don't like,
No,
I
no,
don't
it's
like, I don't like taking the back of the book and like trying to apply it to here because I'm also a fan of not using the back of the book for this. But there is a piece in the back of the book under the toll troll, and there's another subspecies of toll troll called the token minority. And they don't show a picture of the token minority. The only thing they say is that it lives in the subways. And then at the bottom, it shows a New York City subway token, the ones that you would have had to have taken if you were in New York City back in 1983 and trying to look for this treasure. So right now, there's the fact that her dress looks very similar to the Brooklyn train line. You've got the token minority with the New York City tokens being shown in the book. And so there's got to be some play of using the subway to get to this treasure. Okay, so now we'll move on to Coney Island confirmation clues. So when you get to Coney Island, there are 4 subway stations that are on Coney Island. And at the bottom of her dress, which would correspond to the subway line for Brooklyn and Coney Island, you've got 4 jewels. And if you kind of equate them a little bit left to right, you've got Coney Island Station, you've got Aquarium, Ocean Parkway, and Brighton Beach. And the reason this one is called out is because this is the subway station that you've got to get off at if you're going to follow the rest of the clues. I like this piece, to be quite honest with you. So I don't think the dots in the top window panes are the ratio puzzle that Byron said was too hard. I actually think the dots are just artistic and JJP's way of just kind of showing stuff. But when you go to each of these stations, and it's still, right, I didn't change anything. If I go back, it's still, from east to west, Brighton, Ocean, Aquarium, Coney Island. Brighton, Ocean, Aquarium, Coney Island. You've got each of these stations have their own color schemes going on. And so Brighton Beach, it's a bit older now, but you can see that there's a purple theme going on with all the pillars that hold up the station on Brighton Beach. Ocean Parkway is definitely really old, so I'm hoping back in the day it was maybe a little bit prettier, probably doubtful, but you've got a blue kind of theme going on with Ocean Parkway. West 8th Street Aquarium, they did a renovation back in 2002, but some of the original pillars are still there, and you can see that the top portion of it is this reddish maroon color, and on the bottom they've got a yellow color, which is why he split it in half here. But he also split it in half for another reason, I think, which I'll cover in a second. And then Stillwell Coney Island Station also went through a renovation, but before this, it was basically all brick. And there was like an original brick station as well, but you can still see the brick watchtower. And this is kind of brick looking with some oranges and reds and some purpley looking bricks, I'm thinking. So I think he's just trying to show that this is part of Coney Island and you're looking for these stations and this is part of the confirmation for it. But
okay.
within the Seagull Eagle, you also have what looks like a rabbit. And back in the World Book 1980 edition, if you were looking up New York City, under the Coney Island section, you saw that it came from the Dutch word Coney. I don't speak Dutch, but it was named after rabbits. I guess rabbits were very popular in Coney Island. And so if you were someone looking up some information on Coney Island back in the day in the World Book, you would have seen the rabbit piece and then potentially seen this rabbit within the Seagull Eagle. Okay, this is the piece that's very speculative. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say half of what I'm going to tell you is probably wrong. But I think what happened here is that the original painting was not supposed to include these pieces down here, and that it's possible that there was some kind of continuation between these two squares on the bottom left and a continuation of these squares in the top right, or at least to show you that they're connected in some way. So and I need to do a good job because I really cut it off. But between the seagull eagle's wings, there's a break in the window pane,
Mhm.
and if you see the way that it curves, along with the fact that instead of doing dots for potentially this subway station, he decided to break it up into two distinct boxes, right? Two very like clear ones. You get this impression that based on the curve of the seagull eagle's wings, the curve of the window pane, and then the connection between these, because you can see even some of these dots here kind of look like they overlap or they connect, that you get this almost Fibonacci sequence where it's the little curve and the golden ratio. And that's the piece that I think he's referring to, which is that there's a ratio puzzle within the New York City painting that you need to be able to connect to. And the first 5 digits of the Fibonacci sequence using the golden ratio are 11235, which looks like a zip code. And it is a zip code. And 11235 is the zip code for Brighton Beach on Coney Island. So I'm like, well, that's great because Brighton Beach is really Russian and it's in Brooklyn and it's Coney Island adjacent. And so that's got to be it there. The other pieces, though, me being like, this is like a lighter gray in the domes square over here. And so maybe that carried over from this. And there was like one single painting at one point for over here. That's all speculation. I don't think that's probably not right, but that's what I like to tell myself at this point. This is really, really speculative. So this is probably also not right. But within the flower, I see the number 35. And I actually think and I was trying to find it and I was going to take a screenshot of it, but I think at one point, Kit Palancar in one of the comments when he was taking photos of the original New York City painting and posting them on the groups, he also said, well, I see the number 35 in the flower. Now, Kit's not going to know anything, but it was nice to be able to see that kind of confirmation. But 35 was the original, before they had zip codes, they had postal zone numbers. And the original postal zone number for Brighton Beach and that area was 35. So there was this kind of like crossover between like the 60s is when they started transitioning from postal zone numbers to zip codes. You'd have that 11235, and then you have the postal zone number, which would have been 35. Okay, although the sign nearby speaks of Indies native. So this is where I make the connection to the Cyclone. Now you'll have to forgive me. I was trying to find a really cool picture of the Cyclone from a profile picture. The best that I could find is someone made a model of the Cyclone roller coaster, and so that's what we've got here on this slide. But when you get off at West 8th Street Aquarium Station, you very clearly see the Cyclone roller coaster off to your right. And since and it's Indies native, if you think of Indies as either East Indies or West Indies, typically what a definition of the Indies is going to include is the East Indies, right? A lot of people think that the West Indies, but that's usually, it came afterwards, the West Indies, right? It was usually the East Indies in India and all of that area right over there. And as I said in the beginning, before I think we started doing the live, another name for a hurricane and that kind of tropical storm in this area that originates over there is a cyclone, right? And so that's where you would get something like the Cyclone potentially being the Indies native. The line starts with although. So if I've got a table and I say, you got a donut over here, although you have a donut on this side, we've got an apple on that side. So you should probably eat the apple and not the donut. Although in this line is saying, although you've got that on this side, you should go this way. So don't go to where the Cyclone is, although it's there. What you need to do is go the other way. And if you make a left on that street, which is Surf Avenue, you'll eventually come up to after about a block. So it's not very long. This whole journey, by the way, I know the subway is long, so it's like 16 miles from the beginning of the Empire State Building down here, but walking distance, you're really only actually walking about a block or two, right? Because you get on the subway, you ride it all the way down, you come to here, you make a left, and you get to Asser Levy Park. Asser Levy Park wasn't always called Asser Levy Park. It was called Seaside Park for the longest time. But back in 1975, they built the brand new bandstand. So it was the little stage, the theater area. And then 2 years later, they renamed it Asser Levy after the first Jewish settler to own land in America. And 1977 is really close to when the book was like, being thought about and being written and all these things. And I think it's possible that Byron would have known about this or maybe even attended the memorial, or it would have been really important to him because that Jewish heritage for Byron was really important. And for him to see that this park in an area that he loved so much was being named in honor of a Jewish resident would have had some impact on him, I think. Um, and it's very Russian here. And I went down here a couple times in the past month and a half, and you walk into this park and everybody's speaking Russian, and it's like wild. It's like you've walked into another country. But I think Asser Levy Park is got to be one of the strongest contenders because yes, it's got that Russian influence, it's got the Jewish influence as well. It's got some other pieces that really play into it. But when you look back at the window pane on the top, there's a piece that is a little bit stronger, which is the reason I think he didn't make this artistic like these dots and break it up was the ratio to get you to that zip code for Brighton Beach. But it's also to show the L, the E, the V, and the Y for Levy, for Asser Levy Park. I put the A here. This piece is very obviously wrong, but it's my own pareidolia that's popping up. And when I look at the image and I like bring it far enough away and I blur my eyes a little bit, I can kind of see an A that looks to be in this shape. No one else sees it. My wife doesn't see it. My sister didn't see it. So it's definitely pareidolia because I want it to be Asser Levy. But the Levy piece itself is fairly strong, and you can see definitely the E and the V and the L. The Y is kind of weird being so small and backwards, but if I'm making everything fit, that's what I'm going to make fit. So the native speaking of him of hard word. So I don't really think there's honestly anything clever going on with this. I think it's literally that Byron was like, you've got this plaque that's split up, which is, you're starting here. This is the subway station. You got the Cyclone in the bottom left. You walk a block over here. You keep staying on the sidewalk, and eventually you come up to the Teddy Roosevelt Monument on the left-hand side, right over here. And the Teddy Roosevelt Monument is split up into three pieces. Those three pieces are made out of metal that were salvaged from one of these battleships, one of these US battleships way back in the day. And I think it's literally just hard word because it's hard as in metal, and it's split up into three volumes and three plaques. You also get Teddy Roosevelt with the woolly bully in the back of the book too. So if we're already using the token minority to get us on the subway, you've got the woolly bully and his close proximity to Teddy Roosevelt getting you to that connection. The Japanese clue is something that I don't know how it fits in with this. I've played around with it and it's kind of silly. And I think Jeff Shapiro, who also agrees on the Asser Levy solution, I kind of agree with him in the sense that if you start with chicken, you could kind of get to rooster, and then rooster maybe sounds like Roosevelt. That's really weak. I don't know how the Japanese clue plays into this. I'm not going to pretend to know how it does. If there's some way that it does, that'd be awesome. I know Teddy Roosevelt had a chicken. And he also had a rooster, so you got that. Okay, so here we are. So we've walked that block. We're at the Teddy Roosevelt Monument right here in Asser Levy. And if we look around for some kind of V representation, we see this little traffic island right here, right? And it kind of forms a little bit of a V because it's a one-way street. So you've got Surf Avenue going up this way, and then you actually don't have Surf Avenue going the other way. And the reason you don't have Surf Avenue going the other way is because Surf Avenue stops right here and becomes Ocean Parkway. And I think it's my next slide. Oh, fuck. All right. I think it's couple more slides. All right, well, I was about to do something else, but so okay, well, but you were just telling me, Joe, that this whole presentation is Asser Levy, and now you're showing me this weird traffic triangle thing over here. So where did Asser Levy go? Well, if you look at this traffic island, it's called Hennessy Triangle. It's been around forever. And if you go to the New York City Parks website, Hennessy Triangle is
Excuse me.
technically part of Asser Levy Park, and it always has been, right? It's been Hennessy Triangle for a long time, since the early 1900s. It was named after a World War I veteran. So that's there. So it's still technically Asser Levy Park. We haven't changed it, anything like that. And the piece that I was saying was interesting was, you were saying Surf Avenue, you've got the wave breaking, which is the surf. That's what the surf of an ocean is. It's a wave breaking. But Surf Avenue is stopping here and it's branching off into two. And so you've got in the painting a wave breaking, the surf, and the surf is meeting the ocean at this point down here. And to me, underneath the surf, which I think a lot of people see it as being this kind of like buffalo or sheep and there are legs under there, I see two B's, and I see that B as being Brighton Beach. And when you get to that area over here, you've got a street lamp. This is just my own picture that I made, but you've got a sign right here before you get to this split. And the sign is saying you've got to stay right on Ocean Parkway if you want to get to Brighton Beach Avenue. And so in the image, right, if you're looking at surf and you're at ocean and you want to stay right, you'd be getting to Brighton Beach. So it's telling you to look for surf, look for ocean, look for the BB, the Brighton Beach Avenue. So my first sentence on this slide is this is where I'm stumped, because I followed all the clues that I've put together in my head. I went down here and I put my high vis vest on and I brought my little folding military shovel with me on 2 different occasions. And where all these little pink areas are, right here is where I dug. So you've got to find the middle of one branch of the V. And in my opinion, it makes more sense to stick to this side of the branch, because you've got this little green space over here with some dirt. There's like a tiered garden flower bed. But I mean, you're literally walking here and you can look down physically from this sidewalk and see the green space, the dirt, anywhere to dig. So now you go, well, how is Byron defining the middle of one branch? So I took 2 different approaches. I said, okay, well, maybe it's exactly halfway. You measure it, right? So I did my measurements while I was there. I was like, okay, it's got to be halfway. Literally halfway is like this point right here. It's not really very special. There's really nothing around there that's going to signify it. So whatever. There's also a piece over here that I'll talk about in a second. I dug here. And then eventually I came up to think, well, there's 3 street lamps, one at the beginning, one at the end, and then one kind of in the middle. It's a little bit further away from the middle. But so I thought maybe the street lamps would signify the middle. And so I dug here as well. So when you're walking here and you're standing, this is Hennessy Triangle right here. This is the little tiered garden bed, the planter box, whatever you want to call it. Apparently back in the day though, and I was talking to a guy who was asking me why I was digging there, and I was like, well, I'm just checking the foundation over here. And he was like, oh, great. Yeah, you all are working so hard every single day. I really appreciate everything you all are doing for the city. It's like, yeah, thanks, man. Thanks, man. So what can you tell me about Hennessy Triangle? I was like, well, back in the day, this place was beautiful. Like, you think you all are going to fix this up one day? I was like, yeah, man, it'd be nice. It'd be nice if they fixed it up, but money and all those issues. He's like, yeah, but back in the day, this place was beautiful. There were flowers everywhere. There were tulips, all these things. So I don't think, for 2 reasons, I don't think it's inside this planter bed over here. One, because what Bill told me, who's been there for 50 years. But 2, and I won't confirm this because you can't dig in a planter bed or garden bed from a New York City metal detecting permit. So that's just like against the rules and you can get fined for that. So I won't confirm that I dug inside this thing, but I'm going to tell you it's not there based on just know that it's not there. But if you look in the middle of this garden bed right here, you'll see this metal plate that's holding basically the whole thing together. And I don't have any pictures from 1980 of this area, but if you line up that bottom left window pane, which is like the beige with the gray and the red. And I didn't distort this at all, right? This is just how it is, the representation. It fits pretty closely with the dimensions of that metal plate. So it's possible that metal plate was gray back in the day and you've got some red around it. That was what I was thinking. That's why I dug there. And maybe it was some kind of visual marker for, hey, find this metal plate. That's the middle, dig right there. So it's not there though. I dug 3 feet in that area and it's not there. Then I went back and I was like, okay, well, maybe there's another middle. And back in the day, right? Like, I mean, they started transitioning them out, but you had these very iconic New York City street lamps called Desky street lamps. And you can see it in this picture, right? It comes up, it's got this like really nice like bend to it, and it's got this very like iconic kind of light over here. The shadow under her nose is really weird because it's very exaggerated. You look at all the other shadows on her dress, you look at her arms, everything like that. They're all like pretty chill, the shadows, and there's not like a lot going on there. But the shadow under her nose is really exaggerated. And if you take the eye and kind of the curve around her hair, it almost looks like this could be a street lamp, and it's shedding light on the nose and casting this really long shadow. So in my head, I was like, okay, well, maybe Byron was saying you got to look at these street lamps over here. So there's 1, 2, and 3, and there's no better way of being like, just go to the middle of those 3 and start digging. And so I dug the hell out of this area, right? Because you got to go to the middle of one branch of the V and just look down and see simple roots. And simple roots, I'm thinking is like grass. Maybe back in the day there were some flowers on this side over here, but maybe a little bit of a buffer of dirt. And I dug 2.5, 3 feet. I mean, I don't have to tell you, but digging is just like it's hard and there's like roots and there's rocks and there's all these fun things. But I did enough, but I didn't obviously excavate the entire area. So maybe it was off here. You missed by an inch, you missed by a mile. That's where I'm at. So the last line or second to last line in the whole thing in Rhapsodic Man's Soil. I mentioned the bandstand, which was completed back in 1975. If you, do I have it on the next slide? No. I'll show it in a couple slides, but the bandstand is right there in Asser Levy Park. And if you look at where it's facing, it's basically right in front of Hennessy Triangle in this area that you would potentially be digging. And so Rhapsodic Man is probably just all the concerts that are going on there and just saying that it's really musical, and all the soil in front of this bandstand is just going to be very musical and very rhapsodic in that sense. Maybe it has something to do with Rhapsody in Blue. Um, Maybe that's just him way of confirming that it's Brooklyn. Maybe, I don't know. Or gaze north toward the Isle of B. So if you're standing here, so this top image right here is you're basically looking from the dig spot in Hennessy Triangle. And you look straight ahead and you turn your head a little bit to look north. So this is actually due north right here. And you're looking down Ocean Parkway. And Ocean Parkway is a big road. I mean, you got a lot of roads that run up and down Brooklyn, right? And a lot of them that are running up and down north, but none of them are as wide and, in my opinion, like as grand as Ocean Parkway. And it goes like straight all the way up, right? You got Flatbush right here. This is where Byron grew up. So I think he's doing another play on words. And instead of it being an aisle like an island, it's an aisle like a grocery store aisle. And you're looking north toward the Isle of Brooklyn, and it's going all the way straight up, cutting directly through Brooklyn. So here we go. So get a little recap. So you're coming down the subway, get off the subway station, go all the way down here. You got your Roosevelt Monument. You got the bandstand right here that's facing this way. So all of this dirt, all this fun stuff over here could be your rhapsodic soil. And then you've got your V, Hennessy Triangle, street lamps, garden bed, lots of places to dig. And then the end, George. So that's it. So I'm really hoping you're just going to tear this one a new one. And
Look, I like Brighton Beach. I like the park. I like Coney Island. Are you done with your thing? Do you want to stop sharing?
Yeah. I can stop sharing.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't know if there was something else you wanted to go back to.
No. Let me do this. There. Okay. I like Brighton Beach. I like Coney Island. I like everything about it. But you could have went into this entire theory, this entire idea, and never told me that you started at a park and tried to work your way backwards. And I would have known that shit immediately, because you're the first thing you're doing is like, I got to get to a sort of iconic place. I'm going to choose this gray thing in New York, of which there are millions of, which I get. No argument with the Empire State Building. It's an iconic building, right? A lot of people start at the Empire State Building. And then you're like, you know, I got to find an arm somewhere near the Empire State Building that extends over a slender path. So I found this statue that kind of has an arm.
Well, I got to find the shadow, though. I got to find the shadow first. So where's the shadow going?
Kind of extends towards Broadway, which is the exact opposite of a narrow path, but whatever. And then you're like, and then let's skip half the verse. And for some reason, we're going to get on the subway. I like the subway. I like the subway idea. It's a really good idea. But we did skip a quarter of the verse to do that. And then we're like, all right, we're off the subway now. Let's go back and get the shit that we missed. And then to like this idea would have worked out really well if the verse flowed the way you interpreted it. You know,
if it were completely linear, you're saying,
it just doesn't. So it's like, all right, we're at this park, and for some reason, even though verse doesn't tell us to, we're gonna get on the subway and we're gonna go. Like, I feel like people who aren't from New York don't grasp this when they're looking at the map and they're just seeing, oh, you just go down these stops.
I don't think these were meant for people, but these weren't meant for people who weren't from that city.
No, totally. Do you know how hard it would be to get anyone in New York to ride on the subway for an hour?
Yes.
Like, it's an hour-long ride from Manhattan to, and like, you have to already know where you're going, you know, like, because that's not the start of that subway line. It is the end of that subway line. So you have to know.
But here's the thing, George, is and I think Byron was very clever, but I also don't think he was the best puzzle maker. And so in my opinion, because I did it backwards, I started with, because I was like, there's a Russian theme. It's got to be Brighton Beach. I'm going to look around Brighton Beach for some kind of V. That's really what I did. And I found this area. And I was like, well, let me backtrack a little bit and see where this thing could go. I don't know if he meant for you to take, because it's an hour-long subway ride from Manhattan down to Coney Island. I don't know if he meant for you to do that, or if he did, he didn't think that you would be able to solve it non-linearly.
Yeah. I do love the fact that you broke up those lines, because so many hunters don't break up. So many hunters read this as take twice as many east steps as the hour or more from one branch of the middle.
I did. My original solution was at the Verrazano Bridge, and I was like, great, I found my V. I'm going to go to the middle, and I'm going to take 22 steps from the V.
And so many people do that, and it doesn't, that's so, like, that reading it that way doesn't make any sense. It's so much easier to read, take twice as many east steps as the hour or more, and then from one branch of the middle of the V or whatever, look down. You know, like, if you've got a V, one side, like the middle of one side, you look down, you see nothing. The middle of another side, you look down, you see. It also
doesn't make any sense to take literal steps, though, because if you're taking literal steps, you can take fewer than 22.
I agree.
Right? You can definitely take fewer. And you can also take more.
The only thing that I've ever seen that was great, it was great for Coney Island and the steps, is at Luna Park. From the entrance to the steps, or from the entrance to the park, there are these painted footprints.
Okay.
That just walk you. And then I think I was down there with like Nick and Caroline and Jason Olsen and Bradley and a bunch of other people, and we counted in like 21 steps or whatever was where there was like a Y section where you could either go to the Wonder Wheel or go around it.
Yeah.
So that's,
I don't want it to be in Coney Island, to be quite honest with you, because
if it's in Coney Island, it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah. 100% it's gone.
It's all concrete now, and none of it was in the 80s.
Yes.
We were talking to carnies that had been there since the 80s, and they were like, oh, dude, no. If there was anything buried here, it's gone.
Yeah.
Because they shut the whole thing down, bulldozed everything, poured concrete.
That whole area. But if you look at the area that I'm looking at, which I'm hopeful it's there, it has not changed at all since 1980.
The only bad thing about, like, your area is, and don't take this the wrong way, but
No, please, please, please. That's what I'm talking to you for.
you don't have a concrete way of getting there, and once you get there, you don't have instructions on what you need to do. Like you're just kind of pulling shit. Like you're like, oh, here's this outline that kind of looks like a street light, of which there are millions of in New York. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree.
Or here's a V, then it's kind of like a triangle, even though they're two different things. So, I mean, I think Byron was a bad puzzle. Dude, I've got a cramp on my arm. I'm sorry. I think I agree that Byron was a bad puzzle maker, but I do look at things like Boston and Cleveland and Chicago, and even though they weren't great puzzles, they were specific. You know, like in Chicago, R wasn't
Boston one is so debatable. I will agree with you on the Cleveland and the Chicago ones.
Well, the things that we know,
100%.
the things that we know, like
because I love the 5 steps, right? You take those 5 steps north in the Boston one.
Yeah.
And if you use my definition of steps, which it doesn't apply completely because Cleveland also has steps, and those are not subway stations, but the Boston one has steps, and there were 5 steps from, I don't know how you would start here because it's not north of Xenophon and whatever the other one was, but from the public library in Boston, and I'm up here in Massachusetts, and so from the public library in Boston, you would take 5 subway stations north and literally be like 2 blocks away from Langone Park.
I have the privilege of looking at lots and lots of ideas, right? And I see people, I look at Boston, I look at Cleveland, and I look at Chicago, and I look at them as if they're contained to where the puzzle starts to where the puzzle ends, right? First line of the puzzle to the end. And they all make sense. And then I see these people who try to extend a path outward. Like, where do you start somewhere farther away from where the puzzle actually takes place? And those are always like, just kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Not that the people are dumb, but like when you compare the paths that people try to make to the actual solution, it's like, okay, the path part is even worse than. So
mine's freaking 16 miles away, so I completely agree with you. It's insane, right? But then I look at it and I'm like, oh, there's so many coincidences, though, right? There's the D line. There are the tokens in the book.
Yeah, but what you're doing is you're like, do you know how many coincidences you could find in 16 miles of New York?
Yeah.
Right. I guess I just don't see why people feel the need to make that path. Yeah. It just, I don't know. Like if you're gonna start in Coney Island, if you're gonna start in Brighton Beach, start the verse there, or at least pick a part in the verse and start there, and ignore the rest of the verse. Like ignore the what comes before. You know. Don't try to.
So here's what we can do too, though, right? Is in every other one that we've solved so far, it's had a tie in some way to the immigrant group that it focuses on, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, Irish, Greek, right? You've got the Italian, and then so we look at New York, and we've got to find a park that has some proximity or some connection to a Russian population. And that, I mean, if we're looking at like very Russian populations, that doesn't really bring you to a lot of places. Now, I know you like the Coney Island piece of it, but there's really not a lot of Russian influence in Coney Island.
Yeah, it would have to be Brighton. It's got to be Brighton Beach. If we're going for population, but then I would challenge you with Chicago. Like, what the hell does Grant Park have to do with the Irish? Nothing. It's just kind of tangentially. So that argument could be just as valid for like those steps across from the UN, which are just dedicated to some Russian dudes, you know.
But 66% of the solutions so far, and it's only 3, but 66% of them have had a tie to the immigrant group. So Chicago could be the fluke here. That could be the one where he was like, he really messed up, and Chicago was the one.
That's true. I don't know, man. I want somebody to find something in Brighton Beach, Coney Island area, at least. Yes. Like, I feel like, I don't know how, I know sometimes boroughs and neighborhoods, blend in New York, you know, like just when people say you know, like when people are going to Asser Levy Park or whatever, would they say, I'm going to Coney Island? Like if
Yep.
they were going from, you know what I'm saying?
The
Uh,
border between Brighton and Coney Island, those two neighborhoods, is right there at
yeah.
Surf Avenue, Ocean Parkway. So there's definitely blending right there. And
Jeff
and Luna Park is like really not that far away.
Jeff Shapiro, who you mentioned earlier, is very
I
active in this chat,
I
and
I would imagine because he and I agree on the same Hennessy Triangle area. He
he
just came
would
to it differently than I did.
he would like you to know that Coney Island, Brighton Beach, and Sheepshead Bay are all Russian immigrants. But I don't think there's any
Uh,
argument that Brighton Beach is the
its nickname
Russian.
is Little Odessa. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
it's that's if you want Russian in New York, you go to Brighton Beach.
yes.
Um, man, I don't know. Like I like it. I like where you got, and I don't like how
The
you
beginning
got
was
there.
really weak. I agree.
Yeah.
I but there. I mean, the subway stuff. I mean, to me, there's just got to be something with subways because there was, the dress is a very. I know people say Prospect Park, right? I know some people say kind of looks like Manhattan, but there's a lot of people that look at that dress and say, yeah, that's the Brooklyn subway station or
What
the
do you
subway line right
what do
there.
you think is the strongest um line match that you have? Like for a line in the verse.
I think the Indies native, right?
For
That
Teddy
thing.
Roosevelt?
No, no, no. That's the hymn of hard words
Oh
and
no, yeah, yeah.
ponies.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
I
sorry.
think the Indies native one where it's like you've got your Cyclone roller coaster. And it's a big sign, right? I mean, it's like Cyclone right there. So you've got your Indies native, and it's saying although. And I think because it's saying although the Indies native, is right there. So you got to turn away from the Cyclone station or the
So
Cyclone roller coaster.
I remember you telling me that cyclones start in the Indian Ocean. Isn't that what it
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh
They're called cyclones over there.
okay. Okay.
What you wouldn't call a hurricane a cyclone over here.
No, but I mean
Also, if you look up indies, right? If you look up indies on the Google machine, it's going to refer to East Indies and not
yeah.
the West Indies.
But you think that is the strongest oh man, we're in trouble.
That's where I'm at right now. Everyone thinks Hamilton, and I see why, right? West Indies came to New York, all that,
No.
but there's so
Ha-
much Hamilton going on.
Hamilton's going to end up being like the one thing that's tripped everybody up because they've so focused on Hamilton that they've missed something big. It's going to end up being like Feel at Home with Boston, where everybody's like, "Oh no, cuz you're at home where your mother rests, so we're going to go to mother's rest." It's going to be that, you know?
Yeah.
Um
No, I mean, I honestly, I feel like that's the strongest piece of it. I mean, I like my 22 steps, but it also takes you like 16 miles away from Asher Levy Park. So no, I like the Cyclone, right? And I like tying the Cyclone roller coaster because it's Coney Island. I mean, that piece of it in the verse is honestly the only piece of the verse that could potentially tie you to Coney Island.
Well, at least we can agree on one thing. For both of us, our strongest verse tie in Coney Island is the Cyclone, but for
Yes, whether it's the worry,
two
yeah,
different lines for
you
two
say the
different
worrying,
reasons.
yes, yeah. The cars abound. I get that, right? Because what the bumper cars is that how
No, I don't actually like I still feel like that's kind of
because there's
stretchy.
not a lot
Like
of there's not a lot of traffic in Coney Island. I'll tell you that much. People are
yeah.
taking the subway down to Coney Island. They're not
I
driving there.
I think the difference between me and a lot of other searchers is when you get to a point that you like a verse line you don't immediately understand, you start going, "Oh, well maybe it's this or maybe it's that." And I just don't.
Yeah,
So I don't understand Cars Abound because I don't understand it. So that doesn't so I'm not going to
yeah.
make it fit, you know? Like if I were in Luna Park and or somewhere around there, I there was like an antique car ride, but I don't know where
Yeah.
it would sign, but you
I
know
don't know if
what
they
I'm
would
saying? I
abound. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
don't know
Like
if they would
abound is
abound.
like you're like surrounded by them, and it's like everywhere kind of
Yeah,
thing.
but
So that's why I like the subway still because they're subway cars. I
to
mean,
to me, Byron is just so literal in
yes.
his clues. Like his clues are very abstract, and you don't understand them until you do. And then when
Yeah.
you do understand them, they're like, oh, there's nothing else. Nothing else could be metal walls besides iron sides. You know what I'm saying?
But I think he and JJP share this one thing that probably fermented a lot of their relationship is that I think they like to be mischievous. I think they really wanted to just honestly mess with people,
Right, but
right? In like a sneaky way.
I feel like our idea of mischievous is different from theirs.
Yeah,
Because like mischievous for them is just like a small play on words. Whereas
sure.
we are like, no, it takes a rocket
How
science, Ryan's rocket scientist to figure all of this out. First, we got
yeah.
to go to Mars.
Yeah, there you go. I will say this though, right? For the solution or the theory that I put together, because it's not a solution, the theory I put together, you don't need more than, a subway map from back in the day. You don't need more than a world book, and then that's it.
But a very creative imagination and the ability to shuffle the lines of the verse around like William S. Burroughs. Like
Yeah. But you're also telling me that every single one of the other solutions have been completely linear?
they kind of have been, yeah. Chicago's very linear. Cleveland is not, because Cleveland, the whole puzzle exists in like half of a football field. So it doesn't matter. That's
Yeah.
why people can like, well, the verse is flipped or the verse is inside out. It doesn't matter how you do each of those because it's such a tiny little space that no matter which step you do, you end up at the same place. No matter what order you do them in. You know?
So
Boston's
if we go off of what you're saying then, right, which I like, I appreciate what you're saying, right? If we go from the middle of one branch of the V somewhere in Brighton Beach and we take, because for me, I still don't feel like it's got to be an actual step, right? So you've got to do something maybe like a subway stop
no
or
no. I
something that's
so
going to be,
I agree with you that those two things are separate. Right?
yes, okay,
We have gone 22 let's just say for ease, 22 steps
yeah.
in an easterly direction or east some way. And then
Because
that
that's
is
another
the
problem with my theory is that the subway is not, it doesn't run east-west. It's a northbound and southbound station. So that's
yeah.
another piece that counts against what I'm saying.
Well, so when it was the D line, it wasn't the east. It didn't run east.
No, but so let me you don't have to go back. But when you look at any map of the subway
I mean,
line,
I know
right,
that
from
they
back in the
go,
day,
but they
it looks, yeah, well, it looks like, because the way they orient Manhattan in most maps, it's like up and down, but that's not
yeah
the way it actually is geographically speaking. And so if you talk to anybody from New York and you go, which direction is Coney Island? Is it south of you or is it east? Most
yeah.
people are going to be like, yeah, Brooklyn is east. Like you go out east and you go to Brooklyn,
But if
but
you're
it's
taking the
technically
train,
south.
you're taking the train
Yeah, you're
south.
going the south. You're taking the
Yeah, taking the
southbound.
south line. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I
so
got you.
it's not east.
But I mean, I think we both agree that the twice as many steps or more is its own thing,
It's
right?
separate. Yeah, it's
That's
not,
when
you
that
don't, yeah.
stops. And
Mhm.
then from one branch of the middle of the V, like it's once you get past that or more line in this verse, there is
Yeah,
no more action. There are no more action words.
yeah.
You are where you need to be. Look down, and see this or look this way. Like I think I said earlier, like if you take every line from or more down, so you've got from one branch in the middle of the V, and you just assume for pretend in your mind's eye that you're standing at like a cliff's edge with a V,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It says you could look down from one branch of the middle of the V, you could look down and see simple roots and rhapsodic man's soil, or maybe the other side, you would be gazing north towards the Isle
Yeah.
of Bee. Like, right? Like it's a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's giving you a choice to make. One
It's
has a
orienting you, right?
yeah,
You can look north and see this one thing, or you can just, gaze down whatever direction that is at that point.
exactly.
And that's where you need to dig because it has to give you a pretty small space,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's got to be realistically like a foot by a foot. It can't do anything more than that because Byron wouldn't, I don't think he would have wanted you to have done more than a foot by a foot.
I mean, I don't know if you're in the middle where it could be. I mean, it could be as
A
long as
foot
you
by a
can
foot is just,
visualize it.
it's a lot to freaking dig
It's a lot
too,
to dig.
though. A foot by 3 feet is is a lot to dig. So, I
Now
mean, I don't know. And
I'm
the
just
Chicago folks, like, he really, I guess he did have to help them out and he had to like draw them a map. So who knows? Maybe it is a wider space than a foot by a foot.
I mean, I don't disagree with the people who are like who think you just kind of had to get to the general area and then ride in.
Yeah.
because Chicago, as long as we've been working on it, and as many people who have been working on it, we still can't agree where you're supposed to dig. Boston, we're down to like a 2 foot square area, and no
Yeah.
one can agree. It just doesn't give you that. I mean, and there can be arguments about, oh, we're missing stuff in the image, or we're missing stuff, but it doesn't seem that we are.
The Boston one's the weirdest one to me because if we're talking about him being mischievous, like the fact that he's digging underneath a home plate in
Yeah,
a
I kind of
baseball,
that
like
changed my opinion of Byron. Yeah,
that's kind of messed up because you don't
yeah,
just go out and start digging up a baseball field. Like
yeah. I,
kids are
I,
trying to play out there, you know?
it's why I like to make that statement. Like, we assume a lot of things about Byron that we don't actually know if they're true. For the longest time we assumed Byron wants to get people out to experience parks or to experience nature, and he doesn't want to disturb yada yada yada, and then he buried something under home plate, and it's
Yes.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, well,
Like now anything's possible at this
anything's
point.
possible.
So that's why originally I did not dig inside that planter box. When I went to this thing and I was like, oh great, there's a planter box and there's a metal thing right there. Like that looks like it could be a good place to dig. I didn't dig in that spot, but then I was like, well, but it was it was in the Cleveland one, right? You got the Cleveland one in like it's not a planter box, but I don't know, maybe you could stretch it kind of thing. So I don't know with Byron anymore,
Yeah,
right? It's in a baseball field. It's not in a planter box. So
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. There's So who was it? Somebody applauded you. I think it was Rob Carajulio for actually digging, right? And people do that, right? Like, they're like, oh, you can't figure these things out unless you actually dig. I don't actually think that's true, because you should know, like with Cleveland, with Chicago.
I thought I did.
Well,
That's why I went down there
what I'm
twice.
what I'm saying with Cleveland, Boston, and Chicago,
Yeah.
they knew. They knew they were right. Brian and Andy knew they were right.
But they didn't though, right? Because Andy or not Andy, Brian got there and he dug for hours and he was
Yeah,
completely
he
freaking
was
defeated.
he was
And he was like,
he
man,
was
I
4 feet away, right? Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't that he
But that's it though,
didn't,
right? It's like, well,
but
now
it's
we
not.
got this weird thing with Byron where he's like, well, you had to flip it,
But it's
right?
not that he didn't understand 2/3 of the verse, or it's not that he was like, okay, maybe this just sort of relates to Cleveland in general, or this sort of relate. He was like, no, 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 we're in the right spot. Now, where do you dig? And even the Chicago guys, they dug for 6 months, but they knew they were in the right spot.
Yeah.
Even Jason Krupat with his like having to get an excavator and all, he knew
I won't go
it was
into
the right park.
I won't go into the Boston one
I
'cause
don't
I got
like
my
to
opinions on that.
yeah,
But
I don't like to defend the Boston one, but at least in that one, it was like, okay, this is at least the right park. It fits.
yeah, yeah.
So
I don't know. Maybe next spring when I go back to Asher Levy Park and I got another location that I want to try out.
Yeah,
I'll let you know. Maybe you'll see it. But
dude, I'm rooting for you. I mean,
I
feel
hate
like
digging. I hate digging, to be honest with you.
if
Because I got the New York City Parks truck that pulled up. There were 3 New York City cop cars that pulled behind me as I'm digging in my high visibility vest. And every single time, like you're like, oh, this is it. This is it. They're gonna stop. None of them stopped. None of the police cars stopped. But the New York City Parks truck did. And that was the end of my digging session. And I was like, they jumped out of their car. They're like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing digging up? And I was like already done and packing up. It's like, I've got this book and there's a treasure. And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, I got my metal detecting permit. They're like, you drove down from Boston to dig in a park in New York City? Like, what are you thinking? I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm wrong. Bye. And I got out of there as quick as I could.
if I had to place my money, all of my money, on a section of New York where I think this cask is buried, it would be split between Coney Island and Brighton Beach. I would split all of my money. Jeff asked a question. Let me get your opinion on this. He said, why do the 22 steps have to reference the clock in the image? 60 steps in an hour.
Because that's the only hour that you have to reference at this point.
I feel like it's weird that
clock.
a puzzle would give you an hour and then reference an hour and them not be related.
I've seen folks say like it's not an hour as in the clock, it's just a literal hour. And so you've got 60 minutes in an hour and then 120 steps. But like,
Yeah.
boy, howdy, now you're talking about an even larger margin of error because you've got 120 steps or more. Well, how much more, right? Are we talking 10% more? Like now you've got 132 steps that you're talking about. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty large amount of space that you're working with here.
To get me away from one referencing the other, you'd have to like get me off the subway and me be staring at like the 6th hour bar or whatever,
Yeah.
and be like, oh, that hour, okay. No, it feels weird that a puzzle would give you an hour and ask you to reference an hour and it not be the hour that the puzzle.
In all the paintings that have a clock, I think that number or that time of day or whatever it happens to be has got to be very significant to part of the solution.
See, I can argue that, right? Like, because this argument came up a lot when shadows were a big deal, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to be at a park at a specific day and then follow the shadow or whatever. But what if Byron made this entire puzzle based on these very specific hours, and he flew from New Orleans, or he flew from New York to New Orleans to bury this thing at a very specific hour of a very specific day, and it was raining that day.
Mhm.
His whole
Which is very possible.
he's gonna wait another year to do it. Like I don't think so.
The first time I went down to New York City, I did it because I wanted to be there for like, I wanted to get there for 11 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to be able to see the shadow for the Empire State Building falling over Herald Square, and it was cloudy. And I was
Yeah.
just like, well, okay, I guess I'll just have to use shademapper.com and just take their word for it at this point. But you're right. Like he could have gotten there and been like, well, now I guess I'll never know.
I always did kind of like the in the shadow of the gray giant for that like elephant hotel, like just as is in the shadow as is in the past of that, like
Okay.
it lives in its shadow, not
Yeah.
not a literal shadow. But then again, like who knows about that thing? Who knows about that aren't treasure hunters?
Well, I know a lot of people see an elephant in her sleeve too, right? So
Well, a lot of people
I
see a
don't,
lot of
I
things
don't,
in their sleeve.
well, yeah. Pareidolia is big. I mean, JJP probably knew that. There's a lot to put in there and a lot to see. So,
I still like that. Her left hand sleeve, like the bottom of it, still
yeah.
freaks me out because it's the only thing in that image that's just plain white.
Yep.
It has no shadow, it has no design. It does not flow the way fabric flows. It does not follow the form of her dress. It is
The
just
left-hand side
stuck
as you're
there.
looking at it, or her left
Her left
sleeve?
hand. Her
Yeah.
left hand.
So one of my original theories that I had was the Verrazano Bridge. And if you look at the shadow of the Verrazano Bridge at like, I don't know, I was like trying to play with things, being like, well, what does it look like at around 11 o'clock? It falls over another fork in the road, so another triangle. And that triangle that's next to, oh God, what's the name of the park? Why am I missing it? It's like the Rhapsodic Man soil, but it's right to the west of that. It's in the shape of that sleeve. And I, for the longest time, thought like it's got to be in this thing right here. Because if you go to the middle of that branch and you take 22 steps east, you come up to this tree and it's since been cut down. I was like, it's got to be there. It's got to be there. And I was going to dig there for the longest time. And then I thought, well, no, there's really no Russian tie here.
Rob Caragiulio says he's dug that triangle.
No,
There
yeah,
you go.
but where he dug was not right next to the tree. He dug it. If I'm thinking the right person, he dug at the tip of that triangle. I don't think it's there. I'm not like I said. I don't think it's there, but there was a time I did.
I think it's going to take a long time for New York.
Yeah.
Either somebody's going to happen upon it during some sort of construction, or it's going to take a long time because I don't think anything in that verse has been figured out. Whereas, like,
you gotta think to yourself too. Did Byron? Because he's from New York, right? Did he either wanted one of two things? Because he wanted to sell these books, right? He wanted these things to be found relatively soon, not like soon, but
yeah,
relatively soon. Did he want New York to be really easy, right? Because he's from there and he would have loved the press, or did he want New York to be really hard? Because I don't know if there's a middle ground for Byron being from New York.
well, if he wanted them to be really hard, judging by the ones that he didn't care about the difficulty on, if he wanted it to be really hard, it's going to be impossible because he
Yeah.
was already so cryptic. If he were to get any more cryptic, we're just
Yeah.
throw it away, ignore it,
Yep.
because we'll
Yep.
never figure it out. I don't know. I kind of go along with the, like, there are hunters out there who think that Byron wanted this to be his legacy, like that this was his magnum opus. But I kind of have the opinion that no, Byron wanted this done. He wanted these found because he was already planning book two.
Yeah.
You know, this was the publicity tour for the
With
sequel.
Andy and Brian, he had already forgotten about it. He was
Yeah.
surprised that people were still doing it. I think he had put it behind him at that point because he was just like, well, it was a failure. All right. So I don't think he wanted it to be his legacy.
No, I mean,
I think he wanted to sell books.
yeah, yeah.
And
But I
he
mean,
didn't,
like,
which-
I think what people mean by that is that, like, his motivation, like he wanted to leave something for the world. But the secret, if we're being honest, is the least important thing Byron did for the world.
yes.
You know, he did some pretty important shit. This is not one of those things.
Things he would have been much more proud of, right?
Yeah.
Like ebooks, learning through the internet, teaching kids how to read. I don't think this in any way influenced teaching kids how to read.
Yeah, well, it was like the same way we were talking about John earlier, where everybody's like, "Oh, these are the greatest paintings." John's so proud of them. He spent so much time, and John
He's not, though.
he hates
Yes.
these paintings.
Yeah.
That he thinks they're his worst work.
Because I mean, well, you're starting out, right? And you're like kind of finding your style and everything like that. It's going to be a work in progress. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I've heard him be like, yeah, these are not. Yeah, I'm not
very
proud of
good.
these ones.
I mean, like, everybody, like, it's so crazy when you break out of, when you, like, you have this feeling and this idea of what the secret is, and then you get to know the people who are actually involved, right? Like, we, for years, and I say we as hunters total, right? For years have revered these paintings, right? And these verses and whatever. And we're like, they should be in a museum. And then when you see where they're at, they're like stacked up in John's basement. They're not even protected. They're just like, he pulls out the San Francisco and it's got a giant like dent in it from where he hit it with a coffee maker or something. It's like, oh my God, John, it's
so funny because you're right. It's beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yeah.
And so to this very specific niche treasure hunting community, and not neat. I mean, it's sizable, but like, yes, we revere them, but to everybody else in the universe, right? All 8.1 billion, right? Other people, they could care less.
Yeah.
And JJP is also one of those people. He's just
John's-
like, yeah, it was fun. It was fun when we did it, but we're done.
John sits and looks at these paintings and like, I've been in the Smithsonian, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everyone else that's been part of this too, right? From Ben Asen, all the way on up, they're all just like, yeah, it was a fun project, but honestly, we stopped thinking about it once we were done with it.
Yeah.
And JGP was the same way. So no, I see what people are saying. But I also think, to that point too, where we look at the paintings, and this is your point, that you were making. We look at the paintings and we revere them, and JGP is like, yeah, whatever. I think it would have been the same with Byron. I think he would have been like, oh, cool, yeah, it was a fun project to work on, and I was really inspired by Masquerade. But no, I'm working on a lot of other really important things. I'm really working on like literacy and
I'm
kids through comic books.
Breaking into the ebooks market right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, breaking into the ebook. Yeah, exactly. It was fun. It would have been great to do book two, but yeah, it is what it is. So yeah, I just want someone to find something at this point. I don't know how you all do this for years and years. Like the level of stress and anxiety that I felt where I was like, someone's going to get there before I do. Someone's going to start digging in Hennessy Triangle, and they're going to dig it up, and they're going to find it, and I'm not going to find it. And I was like awake for like 2 weeks at night, and I couldn't sleep, and I was like, oh my God.
Do you want me to let you in on the secret of how to deal with it?
There's a mental health episode that you did on the podcast, and I've been putting off listening to that, to be honest with you, because I don't want to know.
The honest thing is we don't care. You know, we don't, like, it's no longer about like being the dude that solves it. It's the secret is so much more that I don't care. Like, you go out, it's like people who are like, I'm going to show you, you're going to be so like, I'm gonna find this, and then I'm gonna tell everybody that you're a know-it-all asshole. I'm like, I don't care. Just go
You
find
all
it.
were talking last week, and I asked a question like, how does this not become the Forest Fen treasure? How does it not become Project Skydrop? Like all of this devolution and stuff. And one of the points that was made, I don't know if you made it or someone in the comments made it, but it was like, this is also not really worth that much
Yeah.
either. This is not a valuable treasure
No.
hunt. So we're obviously not doing it for the money at
Yeah.
this point.
It's only worth your ego, right? It's
Yes,
the
that's what
people.
it
It's
is.
most valuable to the people who, like just so like their the whole worth is in whether or not they can solve this. That's
Yes.
other than that, it's like it's literally like people
But that
get
was
mad.
me. That was me for a long time though. I was like, I'm gonna be that person. I'm gonna solve it. It's gonna be great. The way I've dealt with it now since I have dug, because I'll tell you, digging is really a great way of just like burying it and just being done with it and getting all that stress out of your system. But it is being in a place where you want to be more collaborative. You want a team of people where you're bouncing these ideas off of and being like, yeah, yeah, that's great. Like I love that idea. Here's another idea kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's where it needs to be, where you just get all these teams of people to try solving this.
But oh god, especially after opening up those chat rooms that we did earlier, I think people are starting to realize because there's been a lot of people who have complained like I put my ideas out there and then no one will collaborate with me or people just give me negative opinions and then you
Yeah,
create these private chat rooms and you're like, dude, just invite whoever wants to talk
yeah,
positively about it and then no one shows up. And it's like it's like a gut punch. You're like, "Oh, it's
yeah.
really not it's not that everybody's an asshole, it's that I'm not very convincing." You know?
Yes. Oh, 100%. I put this out there and I was like, great, here it comes, waiting for the comments. And then like nobody
Nothing.
commented on it, nothing. And so I was like, oh, okay. No, that was also very humbling as well. So
Yeah. This was
yeah, all
good.
right.
Like I don't know, man. I man, I just keep I keep waiting cuz like I said before, I don't think anybody has nailed down a single line in this verse and I keep waiting for somebody to do it just to point at something and be like just like oh M and B, it's Mozart and Beethoven, just to point at
Yes,
something or Metal Walls is Ironsides, and it's just going to be right smack dab in the middle of Coney Island, Brighton Beach area.
yes, yes. If you know if Coney Island is the place, right? It at least it's not a very large area, relatively speaking. At
Mm.
least finding a park or something like that. I
Oh,
mean,
dude.
it's not.
So we walked Coney Island. There's legitimately one place in Coney Island you can dig. It's a community garden.
Oh my gosh. Well, no,
They just
you can dig a lot in Coney Island. I mean, oh, you mean like the neighborhood Coney Island, not like the whole
yeah.
kit and
Well,
caboodle.
I mean, like yeah, we
Because you can dig in Asher Levy Park. You just
yeah.
can't dig like near the playground or like the monuments and
But
stuff like that.
where you would consider Coney Island proper,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
there is one community garden. Unless you're digging
Yes.
on the beach, and you're not digging on the beach.
No, no, no. It's definitely not on the beach. If you're on the beach, man. I
Mark
mean, you know
Van
what?
Dam,
But
Mark Van Dam would like you to know that you're using the wrong verse for New York too. If you
oh yeah,
go
yeah,
down
yeah.
that,
No, yeah. This is true.
that's awesome. It's great that this is a singular experience and that you can work on it however you want.
So before I started diving into the New York one, I tried my hand at the Montreal one because I'm up here in Massachusetts, and I was like, which ones are going to be the ones that are like kind of close to me? And so I was looking at the Montreal one, and that one's I know this is like live stream, so I don't want to say a curse word, but that one's like a whole
Go ahead,
show.
dude.
Oh, okay, that one's a shit show, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, because the Montreal Milwaukee people are like, they can't even they can't even agree on it.
You know, I've always been in the is it George Stevens Club? Always been there since day one, wanting to dig at that club, right in Montreal. And all of my friends who were longtime secret hunters were like, "There's no point." They did a bunch of construction, they dug a bunch of stuff up, and they redid the whatevers.
Yeah.
But finally, about 2 months ago, I was like, okay, I've been taking everybody's word for it. And I look at pictures of construction and you can see construction's obviously going on. And I've been taking everybody's word for this digging up this whole, lawn for
Yeah.
years and years and years. Let me actually look into it. And I did look into it. And what I found out was they didn't dig up shit. They
Nice.
put dirt down.
Yeah.
So like the grade for that for that club is 1 foot higher than it was in the 80s, and they dug up nothing in that lawn.
Yeah.
They tore down some tore down a couple of walls and put in a little piece of sidewalk, and that was it. So
Well,
I've got a little more hope for that.
you talk about responses though, like putting responses out and then not getting any answers or comments. The Montreal group is also pretty small. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess because it's Canada maybe, and it just like wasn't as widespread, but there's not a lot of folks looking for the Montreal one, it feels like.
Well, I don't think there are. I think it's mostly local. That challenge of crossing the border is a step
Yeah.
that most hunters won't make.
Yeah.
You know, these small groups, like I feel like we've got these little small groups for all the other cities, and people tend to avoid them because they think they're going to get less response, which they will because there's less members. But what they don't realize is those members are specifically interested in those. So you're going to get very specific information from
Well,
very
you get a small group, but then you also have a small group that's bifurcated between this verse and that verse. So now it's
Yeah.
an even smaller subset from the where you originally started. So
I think over the years, like when Expedition Unknown came out, there was this guy, James something or other, that started switching verses, right? For Charleston. I think he switched the Montreal verse for Charleston or something like that. Anyway, doesn't matter. Before then, that really hadn't happened. Like since the pairings were locked in, that really didn't happen. And then after Expedition Unknown, it started happening quite a lot. And that conversation about Milwaukee and Montreal was pretty common. But now I think people have pretty much settled back in. And it's really
I
just
I like the way it is right now. It all makes sense. I feel like everyone's close.
yeah.
I mean, but it's also going to get to a point where if another one isn't found in the next 10, 20 years, then you probably will get more people switching up the verses.
Let me ask you a question because something just came up, and I'm gonna be the bad guy because it's gonna sound like I'm insulting someone when I'm not. I'm trying not to. So there's a lady in the comments in Facebook. Her name is Patty, and I'm gonna make a comment that sounds like it's insulting her, but I'm not, because Joe, you've seemed to be very kind on the Facebook groups, and your ideas are a little out there sometimes.
Yeah.
If that's a fair comment to make.
I'm surprised you're saying it so nicely, but that's fair.
So Patty said, because I don't think it's in Montreal. How do you handle discussions with people who can't even agree on the cities? Like, so this is a take. If you take John Palancar and Byron and all the creators away, all of the people who have said the cities are correct, if you take them all away and you just look at the puzzle as a whole, there's very little argument that the cities aren't correct, right? Like the book basically tells you in no uncertain terms many, many times what the correct cities are. So when you are engaging in a conversation with someone who can't even get that right,
Yeah.
how do you proceed?
So here's the tough thing with individual people and their views, right? And especially when they're wildly different from the group, is that there's and this actually extends to even just like political discourse, right? It's very difficult to change an individual's mindset if they are very fixed on it. So
Yeah.
honestly, I don't try, but I do like to hear people out because, because they might have a good point. There's a lot that plays into the current cities, right? You can look at the paintings, you can see a lot of the things that tie them. You can look at the verse and see how that ties it to that city as well, especially with like the latitude, longitude coordinates for a lot of them. But I'm always curious. I mean, it
So
just
you just
the
ignore
preponderance
that
of
part.
evidence. Well, I try to because there's just so much of it out
Well,
there.
see, and that's where like I can't. So like when someone comes to me and is like, I want to talk to you about why I think there's a Casque in Phoenix, I'm just like, no, there's no point in doing that. Like the conversation basically stops right there. I just can't get over that part, and I wish I could. So
there's got to be some high level.
I was hoping you knew a magic
high
switch.
level equivalent. No, there's no magic switch, man. There's no magic switch to any of this, to be honest with you. There's got to be a high level what you were saying, right? You want that where M and B, right? You want that line that's going to like really get you there.
Yeah.
You've got to have something like that at a high level that's going to completely redirect you to this place and be so finite that
Yeah.
it's indisputable at
I mean,
that point.
it's possible, right? It's possible something like that could exist, maybe, but it would have to be, oh God, it
It
would
had to be
have to be
big.
like, it would have to be big. It would have to, and you would
Yeah.
have to be able to back it up with other parts of the book.
Yeah.
Like you would have to be like, you guys missed, like, I don't know if your book didn't come with these 40 extra pages that mine came with
Yes.
that talk about
Yeah.
Phoenix. It would have to be huge.
But here's the thing too, though, right? It's been so long that new new things have popped up over time that can fit some of the painting clues
Yeah.
and some of the verse, right? So that's the challenge too, is trying to be like, yeah, but what did that look like 40 years ago now? And
Yeah.
it's just like, well, sometimes we don't have that, right? We don't have people taking pictures in Phoenix, Arizona back in 1980. Not like we did in like New York City in 1980.
See,
So
I thought you were going a completely different direction with that comment because most people are like, it's been 40 years and you guys haven't found one. Maybe you're just wrong about everything, which I
mm,
also think is an invalid argument, but whatever. Because it's
I
not
I
been
don't know
40
what to
years.
think anyway, though. You know what I mean? Well,
Well, let
but
me
if
ask
you
you
know,
this. Okay, so from 1982, when this was published, until the year 2004, 2003, somewhere around there, nobody was really working on this puzzle, right? People were
no,
working on it in 82 and then they would forget about it. And then it picked back up. I mean, Matt Sparks is like, there was a GeoCities page in the late 90s, but nobody's ever been able to find it. I have downloaded the entire archive of GeoCities. Like it's out there.
yes,
You can download it and
yeah,
search for I can't find anything.
yeah.
So like for that long period of time up until 2004 nobody was working on it. And then from 2004 to like 2016, it was only like 20 people, maybe
Yeah.
40, and maybe one of them would dig every 4 or 5 years. You know? So up until Expedition Unknown, like that's when I think the real work started. Otherwise,
All right.
if
I
they had
agree with
been
that. I agree. That's a good perspective.
if they had
Yeah.
been doing hard work before, they would have found the
Yeah.
Japanese book. You know, they would have found they would have called John and got pictures of the paintings. Like they were doing hard work, but they were doing like prep work, and then a big group. So
The problem we have though is that we just don't have any record of people doing the work, right? And at a small scale, you know, these people being local and probably being teenagers or in their 20s, right? Maybe these people just weren't writing the stuff down. I
yeah,
mean, you know, the Chicago guys, they were just kids, and no one even really found out that they had even found the cask until years and years later, unless you live locally to where they were. Now, but to your point too, though, I also think that even in 1983, no one was looking for this because Byron was going back and forth with the Chicago guys and like writing them letters and talking to them. And if there were a lot of people coming in sending him solutions and everything like that, he wouldn't have taken the time that he did with the Chicago guys.
yeah. And I get like he's been in newspapers where he's been like, I get hundreds of letters a week, but he's a publisher. What's he gonna say? Like, no,
Yeah, it's
nobody's
not going to
ever
be
written
like,
me a letter. I don't know
yeah,
anything. You know.
nobody's looking for this thing, and that's it.
I mean, like as few books as there are out there, that's how many books sold. You know,
Yes,
they're extremely hard to find. So it
that's why they're
didn't
so
sell well.
expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't sell well. You had to be lucky enough to have bought the book and be interested in working on it and be in one of the Casque cities in order to
But
have a chance
here's
to
the
find
other
it.
problem that we face now is that for you, right? Because you're saying what, like, when was the expedition unknown? Was that 2017, 2016?
16 maybe?
16? Yeah, yeah. So in this time period now, we're a society that overthinks everything because we have all the information at our fingertips.
Mm,
And these were supposed to be solved with a 1980s mindset, but we don't have a 1980s mindset anymore. So we go on and we find all these connections. We've got the amazing images on the website that you can zoom into 4000x and find like the tiniest little things. And so everyone's looking at it being like, it's here, it's here, it's here. This is the clue. This is the clue. That's a clue. That's a clue. And I just don't think we're taking a 1980s approach to it.
Well,
I honestly think the World Book idea was fantastic.
that
I
was
think that's
great.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, there's also like a whole lot of like instant gratification going on because a lot of hunters, just like you did, come in with a park and then try to make everything fit. But when
Yep.
it doesn't, and instead of finding like instead of finding something that fits and then finding the next thing, like I don't know how to explain it, but like if a
No, no,
lot
you're right. You're right. That's how
if
it would have had to have been done back in
yeah
1980. Because
if
it's
it
easy for me to skip because I can be like Google Maps, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Like let's
yeah
look around all of Brighton Beach here and see which parks look like a V. Like it's so
yeah.
easy for me to do that.
Whereas in 1982, if you were at it the wrong M and B, the next line wouldn't make any sense. And instead of trying to force fit it, you would just be like, okay, I'm wrong. I need to go
Yep.
somewhere else.
Yep. Exactly.
That's why you see these searchers that have been in the same park for like 4 years,
Yeah.
just trying to make everything fit, and trying to explain to them like, hey, maybe you're just totally wrong.
Yeah. It's because we found so few of them though, there's no way of really figuring out like, do we have to do all of this stuff in this order in this same way?
Yeah. But I still don't understand how we make the leap in logic from M and B as Mozart and Beethoven to well, Mozart and Beethoven both had cats, and cats roam around in this, you know what I'm saying? I don't know how we
Yeah.
make that
Yeah.
jump. It
But
doesn't
but you
matter.
also don't but it also doesn't have to be Mozart and Beethoven. It could be Man and Beast,
It
which is
could
how
be
they did it.
dude, you could still be at the same, you could be at the same building and it could be Mozart and Bach, like,
Hmm. Yep, yep.
who knows.
I don't know. Clearly, I don't know, George. I don't know why you're looking at me like I have answers.
It's
I'm
fun
I'm
though.
as new. Yeah, it is fun. It is, but I'm as new as they come, right? And I got a theory that doesn't work. So we'll
Well,
see.
yet, like I feel like we can at least say you're in the right area.
I did the same presentation.
Geographically speaking.
I did the same presentation to my sister, and like, thank goodness she like sat through it. It was really nice of her to sit through it because she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But she goes, well, maybe the or more is you got to do 22 steps and then do 22 steps again. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll try that next time. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
see.
just it's so like that line for people. If there's
The or
any,
more.
yeah,
Yeah.
if there's any question about what you should be doing, you're doing it wrong. Right?
Yes.
It's vague, but not because you have to do a vague thing. It's vague because you don't understand yet.
I'm sure you've also seen it too, where you can take the letters, the first letters in the New York verse,
Do
and
Coney
it spells
Island.
something. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
something like that. The look at Coney Island or something like
Something like
that.
that.
So, all
I
right,
mean,
let me
like
get look.
there's evidence that that's there's Savoy in St. Augustine. There's Italian Fenway in Boston.
Yep.
Um, so I don't know. I don't know.
We'll see.
We'll see. Are we done? Is
We're
that it?
done.
All
That's it.
right.
Thanks for taking the
People,
time, man. I really appreciate it.
that's the disappointment. Oh yeah. Okay. I was reading a comment. I thought somebody was disappointed in you, but they're not.
Well, I'm hoping they're disappointed in me because I'm disappointed.
No, don't be like this was a lot of fun too. But
Yeah, it
I
is. It
feel
is
like
fun.
I wish more people were looking at Coney Island and
Yeah.
Brighton Beach, just because like so many of the things there make way more sense without the sort of leaps of logic people use to end up in Queens or
If there's anything I can give to people who can look in Coney Island, it's the assurance that the NYPD do not care about what you're doing. Literally, three cop cars uh, pulled behind me. They didn't stop. They didn't
yeah.
care. And I was digging some like serious holes. And so I'm not like encouraging people to break the law, but as long as you're sticking to the guidelines of a metal detecting permit and like you're digging, I really don't think you need to be worried about the NYPD.
Yeah, I don't condone illegal digging because I've been
Nope,
asked
nope.
not to,
Yep.
but if there's two cities where you're going to dig and probably not get caught, and like the number one is New York because no one gives a shit what you're doing.
No, you could be doing
Literally everyone
the
minds their own
weirdest shit
business.
in New York City, and
And
it's
then it's like,
like,
it's normal. That
I don't
happens.
care. Yeah.
Welcome to New York.
Yep.
New York and San Francisco. Those are the two places.
Yes. Yep. But
Anyway,
that's why it could also be in like the weirdest place in New York City too, because maybe Byron knew that and he was like, they don't give a shit. 1980, and they got bigger problems to deal with. So
I'm still like my dumb, because I have a lot of dumb ideas, right? Like I'm just like everybody. I have dumb ideas, and my dumbest New York idea is that it's at the Bantam build. The Casque was at the Bantam building.
I saw your
Bantam
comment
offices.
recently. Yeah.
And like I had so many good ideas for it because like
Because you got the chicken logo.
you got the chicken
right?
logo.
Yeah.
Him of Hard Words
Superman.
was Superman, and that
Superman,
DC
yep.
Comics, there was like a big, huge Superman statue at the entrance to the building, and
Yep.
like Bantam's floors were 22 and 23, so twice as many
nice.
steps or
That's
more.
pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured I was like, oh, you just take
And
the
so
elevator up, and
you
then
knock
look for.
you knock on the office, right? It's like
Well,
the middle of one.
imagine going up and then you get out of the elevators and you have an office directory and it's
Yeah.
like Mr. Rockefeller or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I don't know. It was the dumbest idea, but like I can't shake it for some reason.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah. Oh well, if only Byron was
All right.
creative.
I know. Well, if only Byron were still alive, to be honest with you.
That's true. All right, man. Well, I guess we will
Thanks,
end
man.
the stream. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Likewise.
Is there anything I can do before you go? The stream is ended, by the way. Both of them.
Oh yeah. No. You're good.